Good day, good people. Welcome to Cocktails, Conversations, and Lessons in Philanthropy, where we give it to you straight, no chaser. I'm joined by a very special guest. You're going to absolutely love her. I am joined by the lovely, gifted, and talented serial networker and partnerships maven, TeQuion Brookins, principal consultant at the TB Network. Welcome, beautiful. How are you?
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for having me and for that illustrious introduction. I had to take you
Illustrious.
everywhere.
Yes, illustrious. Here. Cheers, cheers. Y'all got to get
Yeah.
into this.
Oh,
Yes, and the nails. Wait a minute. Don't forget about the
listen.
nails. I dare you to get a screenshot. Yes.
Do it one more time. Let me get you on one screenshot.
Yes. Anywho, thank you for that. I had to just give it up for myself. I really did. And I'm repping here in all the holiday decking the halls.
Yes, you
Okay,
are.
I'm decking the halls. Yes, get into it. So I've got my choice beverage, which is a peppermint martini, courtesy of a brand that I like, but we don't promote liquor brands on here because they're not underwriting this production. So let's just know that it's good and it's a brand that you probably drink too. And get into this craftsmanship here. You know, the peppermint around the rim. What you drinking, girl?
I'm over here just keeping it simple with some wine from a special place. I'll try to get it in here. It's Detroit Vineyards. So they actually get all of their grapes and they make it in-house, but they get all their grapes and everything from Michigan. So it's locally homegrown in the facility. You can go there and watch them do it. So that is what I'm sipping on today. Yes.
Yes, that sounds like my kind of digs. You know, I love pomp and circumstance sometimes in presentations. So that sounds like something I'd enjoy. And, you know, Christmas isn't Christmas in Black folks' house until they start playing the Temptations records and the Christmas renditions. And my favorite of all time is This Christmas by Donny Hathaway. So I am definitely getting in the Yuletide spirit over here. So I am thrilled to have you. It's always a joy, you know, whenever you and I get a chance to hang out with each other. I feel like I've known you for years. You know, I love the sisterhood. I love the inspiration that I get from you, the hustle, because you might think that you're doing something out here in these streets. And then you see this sister marketing on steroids. She's got newsletters, networking events, and it's like, oh man, let me step my game up. So, dawg, you know the drill. We come on here for an unscripted conversation. And all I want to hear from you is what's a lesson you've learned in your philanthropy journey?
You know, and hopefully my internet cooperates. But if it pops me off, I'll be right back. So
That's
no
right.
worries.
We're going to keep rolling.
So I've been in this space for about a decade now. And prior to coming to this space, I had no idea that this was even a sector or a thing. And then when I got here and I found out, you know, how sweet of a life that the people
How
in this
sweet it
space have
is.
it, my first thought was we need more Black people here. Like, why isn't all these rooms flooding with Black and brown bodies, right? And so for me, my mission in life was to sort of demystify the funder grantee relationship and to really help grantees understand that funders are people too. Not only are they just people, but 9.9 times out of 10, you know more about whatever issue, whatever, you know, social challenge that you're trying to solve. You are the expert. And sort of leveling the playing field and breaking down those power dynamics for me, part of it is saying and teaching people that you are the gem. They can funders and foundations can't do what they do without you. So really keeping that in mind when you're fundraising, when you're, you know, seeking relationships with funders. I've been in more board meetings than I can count, and I can tell you the meetings that I have with grantees versus the meetings that I hear in those committee and board meetings night and day, and the grantees by far are usually more knowledgeable, more personable, more enjoyable. And so I just want you all to feel empowered in that. And especially if you're Black and Brown, knowing that you are not only the culture, but you shape and shift so much in regards to how dollars are allocated and why. And so it's my life mission to get more of you in those seats where those decisions are made. But just letting you all know that funders are people, and not to knock sort of the knowledge or the expertise or professionalism that exists, because there are some amazing funders out there, but there are some not so amazing funders. And so don't let the titles fool you. Don't let the titles overwhelm you or make you feel like you have to, bow your heads or hunch your shoulders over. You come in those meetings with your chest out, because what you're doing matters. So that will be my biggest thing. And of course, I can dig into why I feel that way.
Yeah, we want to talk about why you feel that way. So what I'm hearing is that nonprofits really should be embracing what they bring to the table in the way of solutions to community social issues, and approaching prospective donors or even existing donors as partners in a solution, and not in a way in which they're coming to the table in kind of a beholden, head down, Tiny Tim in the spirit of Christmas, right? Give me what you got. Adopt a posture of confidence and celebrate and walk in your lived experience. And
Absolutely.
the fact that you have significant lived experience that funders and funder prospects should be paying for that lived experience and valuing that lived experience, because it's really a brain trust that they don't necessarily have.
I mean, so part of why I say what I say, so when I talk about all the meetings that I've been in, so for me, I'm, born and raised Detroit, from the East Side, family, suffering from intergenerational poverty. And so for me, being successful was not just a choice, it's a requirement. And so my hustle is fed by that. But when you're in the meetings with people that don't have that proximity to the struggles, to the challenges, whether they're, economic, social, whatever the case, so you're sitting there and you're like, well, the answer is obvious. Like, why aren't we just doing this? Or why do we need 10 years in a feasibility study just to say yes to something that we know is the answer, right? And so that was a big challenge for me, seeing all these people decorated in title and experience coming into these roles and these positions where they're distributing millions and sometimes billions, depending on the size of the endowment, into communities that they've never been in, that they don't understand. And so for me, when I talk to, grantees and nonprofits, especially now in my practice, where I get to engage with them more one-on-one, my first thing is letting them know, like, the meetings and the conversations that are being had behind closed doors get so grammar school level. I mean, just like basic, not even understanding terminology, And so I really, really wanted to sort of burst the veil and say, it is not what you think it is. It is not these highly sophisticated. And there are cases where there are more sophisticated, teams that have lived experience and expertise in fields and areas. But for the most part, when it comes to those social problems, the value lived experience is understated all the time.
Often, yeah.
And I cannot express enough that just being on the block where the danger is happening or where the pipe is burst, and being able to see, okay, this is the issue and we can solve it using this, and this won't work because I'm staring directly at the burst pipe. I can see the sewage backing up, versus someone that is in a whole nother city saying, oh, well, I heard on social media that there's a burst pipe, so maybe we can do this, right? Just even thinking of it that way. Wouldn't you think that the person that's staring at the pipe every day would have a better solution than that other person?
Absolutely.
So that's a little bit of what I mean when I say that, that lived experience is so important. And it's part of why I started my own nonprofit that serves as the intermediary and re-grants and provides that funding to, Black and Brown individuals addressing and tackling our most sensitive social justice issues and really bringing in people from the community without that decorated resume or past to say, hey, you have experience because you've lived it. You know the answer. You have, the expertise that we're living or looking for, despite what your educational background is or what your professional title is. And so really giving people an opportunity to learn, but also be the solution to the problems facing their own communities was the genesis of that organization. And we've done, great work there. But that would be my 2 cents to anyone that is sort of like nervous about philanthropy and funders, and that whole dynamic is just understanding your power and living in that.
No, that's a beautiful thing, because I'm going to be honest with you and the good people listening. I remember back in the early 2000s when I got into fundraising, and there were different trainings and things. I was a newbie, new development director, and the way that we were socialized back then, and we're not even going to talk about the dearth of melanin that was in this industry even back then. If you think it's a dearth now, it was a desert back then, okay? It was a complete desert back then. And the way that we were socialized as community-based organizations was these program officers, right? And when you really think about the word program officer, I was just having a conversation with a sister out in California the other day on a podcast talking about these pejorative terms, the term officer. Why do we use these types of terms? Why does Black and Brown-led organization, why does anybody necessarily need an officer? This whole state of mind around policing and policing resources, and the assumption that, folks are going to pillage and plumber resources, that I'm not even going to get on my soapbox about it, right? But
we're here. I got you.
We were socialized to believe that philanthropies were these people that literally like sat behind their computers or by their phones, and you better call them and have every duck in a row, every I dotted and every T, because they're making a list and checking it twice of what you call and ask. And it's not to say that people aren't documenting in their CRMs their conversations, but there was just this fear around talking to philanthropies, right? And this notion that, they're really too busy to be bothered to want to hear from you. And I rejected that. And I think that my unwillingness to follow that script, well, let's be clear, I bought into it for a little bit, for a little while, right? But I'm a pretty outgoing person, and ultimately, I want to be relational, which is a really big part of the work we do as fundraisers and in philanthropy. And I always felt like having a conversation, and I encourage people that I'm coaching, I encourage organizations that I'm working with to have conversations, engage funders and funder prospects, talk to them. They're people too. Wield your power as a potential community partner. Like you said, that's an expert in your area of subject matter, right? Whether you're dealing with poverty alleviation in DC's Ward 8 or Ward 7, there are some quote unquote program officers that have never stepped foot over there, for a variety of reasons. And I never really wanted to buy into that and feel as though I was kind of relegated and, needed to be the funder, needed to be so aloof of me and what was going on, right? And I think that that's in part, why I've realized the success that I have is because I wasn't willing to just kind of work in that silo and buy into those systems, right? I wasn't going to take no for an answer. I wanted you to hear from me. I wanted you to hear about my program and service delivery and how it's making a difference, and put a face to the name of the children in the community that were lacking resources that they needed, and how the community and how the school system and public health system and public safety system was failing folks. You might not know, but I know, right? And I think that it's really valuable what you're sharing with people in this perspective that you're giving.
I mean, and definitely, not taking no for an answer, being a hustler at heart, like all of those are tried and true no matter what industry you're in. But one other, I think, piece of why I do what I do the way I do it is, for me, yes, it's about teaching people how to navigate existing philanthropic systems and structures and relationship dynamics, but also a big piece of it is just getting more of us as donors, right? As the endowment owners, as the pool of wealth that creates these opportunities for foundations to exist. And so empowering economic mobility and empowering Black and Brown people to get the bag, right? So that it's not this steady, consistent message of we need to figure out how to navigate these white supremacist or white dominant systems and sectors. No, we are chipping away and becoming part of the sector and having our own wealth that we're passing down, that we're becoming, the endowment, the founders of endowments, so that we don't have to do all the code switching. Because when you look at why philanthropy is the way that it is right now, we know that the bulk of wealth transfer, intergenerational wealth transfer, has been accumulated by white people on the backs of Black and Brown, but by white people. And of course, when you go to build your family foundation or whatever foundation, you're looking to your left and your right to staff that organization, right? Regardless of what their skill set is. See this even today when new foundations are spun up, they're looking to their left and their right. And if you're white, you're likely going to have a white body to your left and your right. If you're brown, you're more likely to have a brown body to your left and your right. So making sure that it's more than just white bodies that access to this wealth is why I also in my practice work to strengthen startups, small businesses led by Black and Brown people, helping them to improve their systems or whatever it is that they need to get to the bag and increase their revenue so that they can begin to be the wealth transferers of their generation, of their families. So we can start to make those shifts and those changes in the sector, not just learning how to ask, but being the givers eventually. So
yeah, and one thing that I really appreciate about you, and I'm telling the good people listening about this sister here, is the fact that not only are you through the TeQuion Brookins network, the TV network, not only are you working with nonprofits and small businesses, predominantly Black and Brown, right, to build their resilience, you also do a fair amount of advocacy within the philanthropic sector, having these conversations and encouraging and challenging, I would say not just encouraging, but challenging philanthropies to rethink how they look at their charitable giving and their charitable giving strategies and even who they're giving to. And that's one of the things that we share in common that I realized early on is that interest in building Black and Brown led serving organizations resilience, but also duking it out with that status quo, those systems of oppression that exist within the philanthropy sector, and saying this really needs to change, because at the rate in which you're administering your dollars and you're funding philanthropy, sir or madam, there are barriers for some really terrific organizations that are doing tremendous work. Like, I know that you're in the D, okay? I don't believe the D is any different than any other city that I've stepped foot in where Black and Brown people are bearing the brunt of just about every inequity you can imagine, right? From social determinants of health to education inequity to environmental
Environmental.
injustice, right?
Yeah.
Having lived in Richmond, I remember hearing about certain oil company and, oil spill and the implications of that in the Richmond community and the impacts of other environmental injustice and Black children and brown children having a higher incidence of asthma as a result, right, of some of the harms that have been perpetrated on that community. But by and by, I'm working in this community of Richmond, California, and I'm living in this community. When I drive to work, my house is 6 minutes away. When I drive to work, I'm seeing people experiencing homelessness literally on the street. These are people that I speak to, that I give money and resources and food to.
Yeah.
Right? And it was probably one of the most frustrating times of my career ever was when I would try as I might to garner new resources and raise the vibration in that community, and to be met with no's, and then to look up and see that more resources were being directed into East Contra Costa County, right, than they were to West Contra Costa County, Richmond, right? When I'm literally, you can see it as soon as you enter the neighborhood, you see it. Whereas out in East Contra Costa County, a more well-resourced community, it's not quite as prevalent, right? So I said all of that to say this: there are organizations that are literally the heartbeat and shoulders of communities that if Ma Dear isn't making sandwiches for kids after school, those kids might not get a meal. And it's like, how dare group of people that aren't so knowledgeable about what's going on in Ma Dear's neighborhood, make a critical decision kind of blindly. They need that they need that context. They need that lived experience that Ma Dear can provide and that the children that she's feeding can offer. And if philanthropies really leaned into that and looked at Ma Dear's organization, right? It may not be the biggest and most beautiful. It may not have lead converting website, but she's making sure that bellies are being fed every single day out of her own resources. Imagine what kind of impact a philanthropy could make if it were to sync up with her, instead of turn thumb a nose and say, well, where's your audit?
And one of my clients right now, the Detroit Residents First Fund, and literally what you're talking about is why the group or the collaborative was established, to recognize those people in the community, residents in the community that are feeding their block, that are teaching the kids, that are, having programs for returning citizens and creating safe and healthy food options and food deserts and all of those things that, they may never have gotten a grant foundation or a corporation or a government entity. But when we think about philanthropy, so far we've been talking about philanthropy from the institutional philanthropy perspective, where we're thinking about foundations and governments. But Black people have been philanthropists since the beginning of time, I'll say. I'm actually involved in a national initiative movement called the Soul of Philanthropy, where they are documenting Black philanthropists to highlight the impact that we have had on philanthropy as a sector, and looking at our stories and what philanthropy looks like to us. And there's so much rhetoric right now in regards to, philanthropy is, a horrible system, it's perpetuating harms, it's this, it's that. And the solutions I'm not going to pretend to know the solutions. Let me say that right now of how to fix all of that. But what I do know is that it's one thing to get more Black people involved in the sort of institutional philanthropy that we've been talking about, but it's another thing to say this whole thing, the system itself is broken. How do we fix just the whole model? And that is going to require radical thought, transformation. No one person, one entity, one organization can do it. It's going to require solidarity, coming together, healing, right? Talking about the elephants in the room. And so I really want people to also be aware that Black people have been philanthropists forever, right? It's a new concept when we talk about institutional philanthropy from, the structures and IRS regulations and the tax and the accounting points. But when you think about the acts giving to a cause, systemic giving to a cause, that is not new. We have churches that have sustained hundreds of years that literally would not be what they are without Black philanthropy, right? And so we know how important the church is to our community, or has been to our community. And so just thinking even of that, one example of how Black people have come together, have gathered their limited resources to make something happen. We know that we have the passion, capability. It's just about mobilizing those resources in a way that actually starts to move the needle more. And I hate the term move the needle, can I just say? I hate the term. I'm so tired of hearing about moving that little bitty needle, because that's not big enough. What we need is a big change. We need to break the gate, bust it open, make it now.
What is that? A wrecking ball. We got a wrecking ball. So let's agree. Let's make a pact. We're not moving the needle.
Yes, no moving the needle.
We're not moving the needle. I'm removing that from my nomenclature. I'm going to say, we're going to bring the wrecking ball, because it's going to take wrecking ball, radical thought, and it's going to take people that are really committed and willing to do new and radical things. And I'm going to say something that might seem a little provocative. And I want to say this. I'm hopeful. And I'm believing that people and organizations like Croom Fundraising and Philanthropy, TeQuion Brookins Network, AbbFee, countless others, right, across the globe, working to bring that wrecking ball, right, and knock down silos and dismantle these oppressive systems, right? I'm believing that we can achieve some durable change, right? I have conversations with philanthropy leaders that are encouraging, white people and Black people alike. I also have some that are not so much, where it's like, okay, they not really there. It's cool. You know what I'm saying? I'm glad I'm not there with them, right? They're going to figure it out sooner than later, right? But here's the deal. In order for that change to happen, there are some people that are going to have to move out of the way. There are some seats that people are going to have to give up. There's some seats that people are going to have to move, and let a vanguard of folks that are really on board and committed to having that change. And I'm going to say this, if you are sitting in a philanthropy seat and you are standing in the way or inhibiting the wonderful work that community-based organizations are doing, and not willing to give them a shot, not willing to do something different, like come from behind your Zoom square, like make a phone call, or even ask somebody who's filling these gaps in the community. Organizations like Croom Fundraising and Philanthropy, the TB Network, TeQuion Brookins, and others are coming. And we're not taking no for an answer, because we're serious about the work of improving outcomes in Black and Brown communities and for Black and Brown people, and it's time. And I realize some people don't want to give up that seat and don't want to move out of the way. I also realize that a lot of people have. There was a lot of movement in philanthropy, albeit quiet. There were a lot of people that really didn't know how to be and act after the George Floyd and the alleged racial reckoning. that we often talk about. There were a lot of people that retired and stepped down and left seats for a variety of reasons. I'm aware that some of them didn't necessarily want to get on board with this train. But if you are standing in the way, if your processes are inhibiting and making it impossible for an organization to find an entree, organizations like mine are organizing and working to subvert what you're doing. And you're going to have to move out of the way. Simply put, you're going to have to move out of the way. It's time. It's been time, because we know that giving to Black organizations and brown, but I'm going to talk specifically about Black, organizations like AFI have pointed out that it has been flat. Bridgespan, this is data, it has been flat for roughly 20 years, if not more. It has been flat. So it's time for change. And I really appreciate you coming on and having this frank and candid and unscripted conversation about how organizations should be viewing themselves, how organizations should be posturing themselves when they engage philanthropies around supporting their programs. You are a valuable partner that a philanthropy should be proud to align vectors and work with to make wrecking ball impact, not move the needle. Right? So square your shoulders up and approach them from that place. And if you need support and methods, you've got folks like Croom and TeQuion Brookins that are happy to give you the playbook, because it's really time, and we're serious about changing outcomes in communities of color.
Yes, ditto to everything she just said. Yes.
So with that, sis, I know you got to get back at it. I got to get back at it too. We're working to get people free and liberated. So with that, sis, I want to thank you for hanging out with me and sharing this incredible lesson you've learned. And I want to just thank you for the work that you do. I've been a party to it. If you've not worked with this sister, she is incredible. I mean, incredible. What she's doing in Detroit is incredible. So with that, we're going to sign off and just wish everybody a Merry Christmas and happy holiday season.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Of course.